things that we're asking about mean, because I think a lot of people sometimes get to some of these items that they're not really sure what we're asking or why we're asking it. The thing I was talking about with a few people when we first started looking at this, if I were leaving the company tomorrow and I could only take one piece of information with me, it wouldn't be, die drawings or shop drawings or some spreadsheet. It would be the pre-takeoff meeting notes, because this set of notes right here is an amalgam of like all the problems we've had over the years. We've just added to this to try to keep ourselves from running into the same problem. So as a project manager, I think this document is really important because it's really the history of different problems people have had and trying to keep you from repeating those same problems. If there's something in this document as you're going through to fill it out for your pre-takeoff meeting that doesn't make sense, please ask somebody and figure out what it means, because they're all on here for a reason. There's nothing got on this sheet without having come from some problem we had. So I think that's the first thing I'd just like to stress is that, there aren't really things on here you want to skip. They may not apply to your job this time, but they will apply to your job at some point. So understanding all of these things makes you a better project manager just in general. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go through these notes. And if there are things you run into, please ask as we go, because a normal meeting's an hour. I don't know if I can get through all these notes in an hour. It may be a 2-part class, but we'll give it a run. Depends on how many questions we have and how deep we have to go. But the first thing that came up was, when I'm in the meeting, when I'm conducting the meeting, which things do I need to really talk about in the meeting, and which things can I kind of, not have to talk about in the meeting? And at the offsite, we started a little game plan of like things you do want to say at the meeting and things you just need to kind of answer in the notes themselves. So I made this new page called Pre-takeoff Meeting Notes Beta. And on this page, what I've done is I've highlighted the things you want to talk about in the meeting, and everything else you can just answer when you fill out the notes and email them out. So when we go through today, as I go through, if you see it in yellow, it would be something you would discuss in the room. And if it's not in yellow, it's something you would just have answered when you sent the notes out. Because the game plan is, before you get to the pre-takeoff meeting, you're going to cut and paste these into a Word document. You're going to then fill them all out. You're going to send them out to your team, give them a chance to review them maybe for a day or two before the meeting, and then you're going to have your meeting. So if people come with questions, they can ask about anything on the list. But as a PM, you really are only going to need to discuss the things in yellow. And of course, those may change over time. Maybe something needs to be yellow that isn't, so maybe something yellow doesn't need to be. But this was our best run at it with the people that were in the offsite and then some other people that I ran this by. So, all right. So initially, these notes up here, just getting your takeoff meeting notes ready. This first question about BIM 360 is because some of your GCs are requesting that we host our model in their hub. When that happens, anybody that's going to work on your job needs to have access to that hub. And you have to request that through your GC. So this first question is because all these people that come to your meeting are going to need to get into your model to do their takeoffs. And they won't be able to if that isn't in our BIM 360 hub, it's in the GC's hub. So, and you'll probably learn this early when you're working with drafting, but it's something you need to know when you come to the meeting, because you need to know all the different people that you're going to have to request access with the GC for this access to BIM 360. So that's that very first question, what that's about. Any questions on that?
Steve, is that happening more and more kind of thing, or do you have a lot of jobs where it's on the other company's hub?
About 20% of the jobs.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's going to get cleaned up by Autodesk. There's a new way to do this where we won't have to do that. So this question may go away in the next 6 months. Yeah. But it hasn't quite got in place yet, but it's very close. So.
Thanks.
Is there a way that we can get the group of who all needs it for this particular project before this meeting, so we can then have it? We may request to get them access, but it may take a few days.
Yeah, I think when you go to do the notes, if this is a yes, then whoever you're going to send the notes to, that's who you send that. Who will need access so I can get you BIM 360 access question.
Okay.
Yeah. First part's easy. Everybody gets this, just to put the dates down of what's on your project schedule for these dates. I don't think there's much to go over there. Everybody seems to get that very well. But again, you can just write them down here. You don't have to talk about them in the meeting. Releases, shop monitor. I think most people get that, and it's been pretty specific. Like, I think we've been getting that done early. I don't think that comes up very often anymore. And then complete set of shop drawings and key sheets when fabrication tickets and work orders are released. I don't see many questions on that. And then shop will be pulling a care package, pre-pulling the care package. So there's a care package Swiss that you have to go through, because again, you want to bring that to the meeting, because when we get done with your last release, we're also issuing the care package to the shop so that the shop can then get rid of all the extra materials that came from the overage and things like that. And then for unitized jobs, is the pallet schedule completed, which should be a yes by the time you get to this meeting. It should be happening that week. We should be wrapping it up. And then, what week do you want your field use fabricated? So, you might be building all the units ahead of time, and you only need the field use maybe in week 7 of a big job. But on smaller jobs, you probably want that field use stuff fabricated in the first week, so it's ready for your field guys a little earlier before they start setting units. So this, a lot of times this is week 1, but on bigger jobs, sometimes it's not week 1. You don't need it till later in the fabrication.
Does anybody in the takeoff group care if the pallets are the original pallets or the toasters?
Not in the takeoff group, but
Okay.
It comes up in the next section because the shop does.
Okay.
So for unitized walls, so distribution, for unitized, we're following the pallet schedule, obviously, but we do want to know how many are in the toast position in the wolf packs and how many are pancakes. And your pallet schedule should show that, and your field guys should know that. So, and usually you're going to be doing some conversation with your field people before you fill this out, because there's a number of questions on here where you need field input. So this is one of them that you probably want to get some input from the field guys to fill this out easily.
Okay. The reason why I asked that, Steve, was because if it's the toaster position ones, then aren't they doing a metal takeoff to build those, or is that done?
That's already done. They should.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, those guys are kind of building up an inventory of that stuff ahead of time, so it's not something you have to worry about.
Oh, okay. So that was early on. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, in the beginning that might have happened, but they should have plenty now.
Okay.
And then just a reminder that sunshade brackets affect how units are packaged, because we've missed that before. Somebody's thinking they're sticking 5 units in a toast position in a wolf pack, and then there's a 6-inch sunshade bracket, which prevents them from putting more than 3. So you just got to make sure you're thinking about the sunshade brackets during that process. But your field guys should have that nailed down, but just keep that in mind when you're talking about it. For unitize, how do you want the field use parts distributed? This one always gets confusing, so I'm going to show you what this looks like. Let me do this real quick. I'm going to stop sharing for a second, and I'm going to share my screen instead of just... Okay. So for field use distribution, so I've listed this whole thing. I've written it all out, exactly what we're doing. The thing is, with field use distribution, we had a bunch of confusion on this at one point, and we were doing like tons and tons of distributions. The more distributions you have, the more chance of error, the more chance of waste on the job site trying to find stuff. So you want to keep it down to, something should be below 20 for sure. But when you click here, we give you an example of what a field use distribution should look like. So when we say bring this to the meeting, you should be bringing something that looks like this to the meeting. And your field guys are putting this together. So, and then the way we usually look at this is the ground floor should be a 1, the second floor should be a 2, the third floor should be a 3, then use your alpha characters to denote different areas of the building. So if you're on, if somebody gets a package on the job site, you'd want to know that something that says 3 goes on the 3rd floor, and something that says 4 that goes on the 4th floor, without having even having a sheet to look at. But if we keep that consistent with all the way that we do these packaging, it'll be nice for the field guys, because they'll see it the same every time it shows up. But when you're doing distributions like this, you need to bring something like this, because if you don't, there's a lot of confusion that happens later and you won't get what you're thinking. And that's listed right on that page. So.
Hey, Steve, quick question on
Yes.
that distribution. Is it the foreman that's making that or the superintendent? And at what point do they do that?
Tim?
So I just recently did this for PIP, and I did it the week before. So that was new to me. I wasn't previously doing that, but I normally would get with them. Like, just now I have a few coming up the next couple weeks for Dining Commons and for Project Nomar. But I have a JPS preliminary plan, and I get with the lead guy, and it's based off of that. So it's already kind of somewhat done, and I'm just kind of finalizing, spending an hour just doing this part.
Yeah, so I think here, Jerome, it's the super working with the guy who's going to be on the site, because the supers have the more consistent view of what all the jobs do. The guy on the job site needs to be involved because he's the one who's going to have to live with it, right? So.
Okay, cool.
Thanks. And to clarify timing, JJ, that should be brought to the pre-takeoff meeting. Like, it should be done for this meeting.
Okay, yeah, done before that meeting. Okay.
Yeah, and then for stick walls, the same thing. Just whether it's field use for the field use parts for the unitized, or if it's the field logistics plan, bring that to the meeting. That's what we're looking for. And again, meet with your field guys, go through what they're looking for before the meeting. That's what we're looking. When you come to this meeting, you're running this meeting with all these people in the room. That isn't the point to ask, the field guy, hey, do we have that? So, and then you should have probably already done your meeting with Sherwin at this point to figure out how many panel distributions and releases you have. But if you haven't, you should before this meeting. All right, and that comes up a lot. The distribution thing comes up a lot that people are not quite sure what we're looking for. So any questions on distribution? Make sense? All right, shop drawings. A lot of this shop drawing stuff, it really is just reminders for you to look over the shop drawings and make sure all this stuff's in there. So we took almost all of this out of the meeting itself. You just need to write the answers next to the questions as part of your response when you send this out for everybody to review. So we're looking for, are the shop drawings complete? And then you're going to distribute a set to be worked from. We're trying to figure out where's point A, like what am I building, right? So just make sure we're clear about like where we're at when we show up at the meeting. If it's a Revit job, make sure the CAD exports were done. And again, you can just check in with James or Eureka if you're not sure. Are the shop drawings approved? If not, have they been reviewed? And are there any shop drawing issues you anticipate or the team should know about? Again, I understand that sometimes you come to the pre-takeoff meeting and the drawings aren't approved, but you should have at least been through one round of reviews and have a pretty good idea of anything that might still be open. And that's all we're looking for here. Sometimes I get 20 minutes on where we're at with shop drawings, but just anything the team needs to know, not everything right? Have we coordinated our drawings with the structural steel drawings, with the deck drawings? Again, we run into this problem a lot. If we don't look at the structural drawings, sometimes we end up with conflicts on the job site. So just make sure that's been done. Have we coordinated our drawings with the precast drawings? And again, just making sure that we've done our precast coordination. Are all the embeds shown on the drawings aligned with where the precast drawings show them? So have we compared where the precast is putting their embed and we're putting ours to make sure they're not in the same place? Because sometimes theirs are pretty close to their edge. Then our jam embed might be in a very similar location. They're 18 inches long. So just making sure we've done that coordination too. Will there be a total station layout drawing? Again, your superintendent will know whether they need one or not and make sure that the drafting group knows that. Have we reviewed all MAC clip locations and ensured nothing interferes with the horizontals? So, up and down, you want to make sure your MAC clips are at a height where they're not running into your horizontal mullions. Seems obvious, but we've had that problem before. For anchors, are there offset tubes with hook lugs at corners, jams, or special conditions? Are there tubes shown properly on the elevations and details? Are the embed locations matching the elevation and details? Are the tubes consistent from floor to floor? So I think drafting's gotten a lot better with this, but again, you're just looking for does that go straight up the building? Are they shown on the elevations that can I understand clearly where they should be? And do they make sense to me, right? Do you have any tech wall with either a sloping head or sill member? And again, if you do, then the T and F clips will need to be break shapes. You can't use a straight T or F clip if you're up at an angle like that. So that's just one we've run into in the past. Material takeoffs will be based on the shop drawings you bring to the meeting. Anything after that, you have to do a drafting request. I think that's pretty well known. And then on Thursday before the metal takeoff, drafting will print to PDF the latest set and make a new review set. The model will not be available to drafting during the week. This is an AutoCAD job. We will move to the AutoCAD files during the takeoff week and put them back the following Monday. So just trying to make sure you guys are aware that while the takeoff's happening, we need to have full access. You may not have access. Sometimes we'll coordinate that, but hopefully we're not at that point. It's been a while since we've been deep in the drawings when we're trying to do the takeoff, but have we included sections in the drawings, making sure there's detail bubbles on the sections, that we have the plot plan legend. That was something the field was looking for, but I think that's fairly consistent these days. Do we have dimensions on the floor plans, and are they going from the column to the rough openings? Again, these were all field requests that we're trying to make sure we're complying with. Please be sure to keep all the key sheets for the metal on one key sheet if possible. I think that's pretty automated these days, but if there's a lot of mark numbers, like sometimes on tech walls, you get a big buildup of parts. And if the scale of the drawing's small, it's hard to see them all and they have to move them around. But we'd like them on one key if you can do it. And then panel key sheets also, we should have one panel key sheet at the end of it all. But I think Sherwin's been doing that pretty much consistently. So this one, we talked about it another offsite in Pleasanton. Please confirm you have physically checked the throat dimension of the parapet caps. So we show the parapet cap, we show it over the top of our curtain wall and some construction in the back, but that dimension is a little suspect because there's a lot of buildup in the back where we have all of the, I'm sorry, I'm looking over here, you're really over here. Okay, there's a lot of buildup in the back where the roofing comes up, and that roofing can build up fairly deeply. That's why we have that big joint in the back, the 1 inch, but you should get that overall dimension, at least, you know, maybe your field guy can take it or whatever. We should double check that dimension because that dimension is sometimes wrong and then the parapet caps don't fit. And it's a hard argument to have with the customer when we didn't even check it, right?
I think this meeting may be too early to physically check that dimension though. Should we change that to say, you know, check it in the future or just coordinate that dimension?
Yeah, I think I can update that language. At this stage, it would be a matter of like where are we on this job, right? So I think we do have to kind of like take a look at that. But definitely I want to get that thing double checked because I mean we talk about making a sample and bringing it out to the job site and actually sticking it on there or whatever, right? So Sherwin may have to hold off a little bit on the release of these things if we don't know what size that is.
Yeah,
but
oftentimes though, I mean, I know that happens once in a while, right? And I know it happened recently on a couple jobs. But a lot of times you might not have the time, right? But I guess you don't have the time to do it twice either. So
well, and if we don't have the time, then it's a conversation with the customer, right? It's like, hey,
right.
You know, your studs aren't up yet, your roofing isn't up yet. This is what I'm figuring. Is that enough, right? And get with him, get him bought in to what that overall dimension wants to be, right? Or get the stud guy, he'll bring the stud guy in and go, hey, what are we doing here or whatever, right? So I think it's just, you know, be careful on that one because we've gotten burned on that a lot of jobs. So
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's not always going to be the same around the entire roof. You need to check it in a couple locations because it could change.
Yeah, there's some tolerance there for sure. Are there any transitions on the project? So Esley should have looked the job over at the beginning. If she did, then she would have spotted the transitions and drawn up the transition details. But you know, this is something we're just looking for to make sure that any of the transitions have been drawn up so that, you know, the guys in the field know how to install it and the guys doing the takeoffs and the tickets know how to build it. Buyout systems. So again, if you have vendors that are drawing shop drawings for buyout systems, you know, make sure those are getting reviewed just like everything else. Because we've had a number of jobs where nobody looked at the buyout system shop drawings and a bunch of problems ensued. So go through your same process of getting drawings out for 80% review, or, you know, even 100% review if you have to, but make sure the drawings for the buyout systems are getting reviewed. Especially if you're putting doors into R openings or something like that. Get with Paisel, make sure they fit. Are there any zipper units on your project? And then looking at it, are you coming from the inside or the outside? And then any future considerations. So if you got medical office equipment or something coming in, just making sure they're set up properly. So, and the zipper unit should be clearly denoted on the elevations if you have them so that we don't miss them. So again, you're going to answer all that just in writing. You don't have to talk about that in the meeting. Calcs are the same way. Have the calculations been done? That should be a yes. If we not, did we review the shop drawings for deflection and steel where necessary? And if we didn't do that, have we looked at the anchor conditions? But typically, I think this one hasn't been a problem lately. We're getting the engineers involved a lot earlier. But we do need to know all of the steel and things like that before we start the fab tickets, because it impacts a lot of things on the job. Okay, system type. So is this a stick wall with multiple buildings? So we've had this come up in the past where we have like a campus job with stick. Don't do it very much these days, but making sure the mark numbers, talk about the mark numbers. Do I want the same exact piece of glass for all 4 buildings if it's the same size so I don't get messed up, or does it matter at all? But again, that doesn't come up much these days. We're not doing a lot of stick multiple buildings. And then backset glazing. Usually this comes up these days in a elevator shaft where they want to turn the system around and have the glass to the inside so there's no ledge. But again, if we're flipping that part around, we got to make sure that everybody's clear about how to orient those on the fab tickets so the parts come out correctly. So if you have that on your job, it's just, we need to talk about that in the meeting and make sure everybody's clear. Any questions on shop drawings, calcs, or systems? Cool. All right, doors, everybody's favorite. Door types, just list out if you have any glass doors, aluminum doors, whatever type of doors you have that we're supplying. And if we have aluminum doors, what type of style, so we're all clear, if it's narrow, medium, or wide. How many singles and how many pairs? We're looking for a count so we can double check that we have it all right when we do the takeoffs for you. And then do we have any applied grid buttons? Doesn't happen often, but it comes up, but we need to know that ahead of time for the way we're going to build the doors. Did you send the hardware specifications to Paisel and Cesar so they can review it ahead of time? That should be a yes, because they're usually looking for the stuff early. But, you know, because this can kind of delay your whole door submittal if we have a bunch of questions. We can't really finish the door schedule. Are there any special top or bottom rails required? Sometimes the customer doesn't want the typical top rail. They want a smaller one or that type of thing. So just give us a heads up if that's happening. Are there any in-swing doors and how many? And then this one, I for some reason, once we wrote this note, we stopped having Glenn Johnsons. But when you have a Glenn Johnson, we have to rip down a door adapter and then use that back half of the door adapter to hide the arm of the Glenn Johnson. So you have to add some additional door adapters to your takeoff if we end up with a Glenn Johnson on the job. So that's why we're asking this question here. Is there any glass thicker than an inch? Yes.
Question on the Glenn Johnson. That's only when, I can't remember now if it's concealed or exposed, but it's only when one of them applies, right?
I think it's the concealed one.
The concealed, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the exposed one, you see it. The concealed one, we're trying to hide the arm. If there's any door glass thicker than an inch, it might affect your glass stops, and the glass stops are the gaskets we're using. So we're just trying to find out. You can only go so thick on the doors anyway. So a lot of times the doors stay 1 inch even when the glass is thicker on the job. But give us a heads up if anything's different on the glass thickness. Roof screen doors. So we got burned on this on a bunch of the Moffats. So we got to remember to adjust the height of the pull handles and the exit hardware for roof screen doors. And then there's also a hardware specification that we usually suggest here. Like hopefully by the time you get to the takeoff, we've already talked to the customer about this, but if not, you know, the roof screens tend to get the wind really gets high up there and those doors just whip open and all the hardware just starts jacking up. So we can Steve Paisel can help you with that if you have it. Do you have any doors with extended pivots? So we've had this in the past where they want to clad the door with a panel. And so they use an extended pivot on the door, but that means the door swings out in a very different way and it can cause all sorts of different problems. So if you run into that, let us know ahead of time. And again, Paisel can help you with what you need to be thinking about if that comes up. When releasing the fabrication tickets, remember to separate the door header and subframe cut lists and give them to Paisel. Don't release this as part of the fab package. I think that comes up in a couple places. Just because those don't go through the normal fab, they go through the door fab.
But I think that normally happens before us, like we're not the ones separating that out.
Okay, that'd be helpful, but just, it's good that you know why we're doing it and where to find it, right?
Okay.
And then any Bloomcraft panics on the job. So we had this on a job where we had drawn Bloomcraft jobs with doors with Bloomcraft panics, but the doors had been modified to be a different width. And when they were not a standard width, the Bloomcrafts went way up in price, and the PM didn't realize it. So again, that's what this question's about, is I don't want you to get burned because the customer changes the door size on you and you're like, oh, okay, no big deal. And then it turns out your Bloomcrafts are 3 times the price they used to be. Let's see. Do you have floor closers? Do our drawings show the location of the closer blockouts? Because again, we want them to, we don't want to have to go drill holes for these things. So we're looking to have the blockouts shown on the shop drawings. And then if you're using floor closer with an offset pivot, the closer will be outside the face of the system. So again, sometimes your blockout is coming out through the slab because they're pouring the exterior slab later. So just giving you a little heads up on that stuff, because it doesn't come up all the time, but it's good to be aware of. And it can save you some trouble downstream if you're coordinating that early.
Steve, for the floor closure blockouts, are we putting those on edge of slab drawings or shop drawings?
I think those are showing up on the edge of slab drawing.
Okay.
That's where they should show up, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
I agree with that.
Gotcha.
And then auto operators, making sure we have the right header for the type of auto operator we have, because sometimes that gets missed. We'll have a certain auto operator, but we're using a 5-inch header that needs a 6-inch header, or vice versa. Any conditions that require a subframe for the doors, like view glass to run wires, Wausau, Arcadium systems. And so what parts are being used? Tubes, angle, plates. This part needs to be identified in the metal PO rec. So that is for the doors. We want to make sure that it's painted with the door package. So we ship all our doors out once we've made them and we get them painted. We want to get all these miscellaneous things painted also. So if you've got parts and pieces like this that need to go with the doors, we need to identify that early so we can get that shipped with your material to certified when we paint the doors. Any buyout door material being used with our storefront doors. So door jam adapters should be fabricated in the door department. These dimensions should be field measured prior to fabrication. So we've had jobs where they want to put somebody else's door into our frame with our door adapters. And then you got to really be careful about the pivot locations and things like that. Our standards don't always apply when it comes to somebody else's door. So will there be door panels? So in other words, are we making a bunch of panels into a door in a wall? We've done that before. Something that needs to be identified because it takes a little extra scrutiny. And then Zern drains. And then if you have a PT slab with Zern drain, we really need to be coordinating that super early. And then there's an infinity drain we use when it conflicts with the depth on those PT slabs. Any questions on doors? Ooh. All right, finishes.
Hey, Steve, wait, real quick on doors. On that Zern drain, on that notice that we send out when they have Zern drains, does it mention an infinity drain on there? I can't remember the verbiage.
I don't believe it does.
We should probably add that, huh?
No.
Should we add that?
I think it would be one of those things where we're sending out that thing about the Zern drains, and then that's when we just talk about if there's a PT slab, and then we get into that second discussion.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think Bascom Station has PT slabs on the ground floor, maybe?
Yeah, up through 4, and then actually 5, and then it's concrete after that, 6 through
Okay.
10.
Yeah, I
But
think with that one,
maybe,
yeah, there were a couple jobs with upcoming
Mhm.
with PT slabs, so.
but maybe we do have something there in regards to it, because I don't know if everyone's going to instantly know, oh, it's PT, so now I need to go to infinity drain. I don't know if there's a trigger saying, okay, that is gonna be a conflict. This is your
Right.
solution. So
Can
maybe we
we,
need to look someplace else to add
Yeah,
that.
that's kind of why I was thinking about adding that,
Yeah,
just
But I
as a
think
precaution.
just because it's a PT slab doesn't mean for sure you can't do a zern drain. Maybe the language would, and I don't want to start throwing out a bunch of options because it confuses people, but just say, if there is interference with the PT cable, look for alternate drain solutions or something like that, as opposed
Yeah.
to starting to throw a
maybe-
bunch of stuff out.
Well, then, so maybe this is worded correctly, because it says, if so, you will need to switch. So maybe we changed it here.
we could change this language, but I think, Lisa, maybe we just add this to talk about when we first meet with the PM. Because that's where we're
Yeah,
asking if we have
okay.
PT slabs, and if we have PT slabs, let's ask about if we have zern drains.
Okay,
and-
I'll
and
update
get
that one.
Yeah, do that conversation early.
Okay,
Because by the time you get to this pre-takeoff meeting, it's pretty late to be coordinating PT slabs and drains, so.
yeah, okay, I'll add it.
All right, for finishes, we're gonna talk about finishes in the meeting because this is critical. If we don't get your color right, nothing's right. Every fab ticket can be right, everything we ordered can be right, everything can be right. If I got the wrong glass type, if I've got the wrong, finish color, nothing's right? So this is critical to your, being successful on your project. So I need all the finishes listed out. So how do you want them, what is the name of every color we're gonna have? And then if we have multiple colors, let's walk through carefully and explain exactly where the colors are. Because if we get this wrong, we're wrong everywhere. List all the finishes for the panels or composite panels. So we're gonna list all those down here. For composite, make sure you have 2 architect-approved drawdown samples. One of these is for our record, and the others will be given to the purchasing to submit with the order. Which product will be painted at certified? So this comes up a lot. So we ship all our doors to be painted at certified, but we need a list of what are all the things we're going to paint at certified, because up front we're trying to create a PO because we do one warranty. That way you're not getting dinged for warranties from everybody that paints it certified. So Pole's painting it certified, and Wausau's painting it certified, and your louver guy's painting it certified, and you get your brake shapes in certified, and your doors are going to certified. You only have to pay for one warranty. But we need a list so we can create this PO. So please create a PO rec to certify for all products and the finish warranty. Heather will need to know what finishes are required for each product. So this is what she's looking for up front. So when you're at this pre-takeoff meeting, you might as well build this PO rec and get it to Heather and walk through it with her and make sure she's clear about what we're getting it certified and the warranties we're going to need. If we have multiple colors of aluminum panels, composite panels, shadow box panels, or shop and field use brake shapes are required, review where each are used on the building. Glass, composite, and shadow box callouts on the elevation should be specific to finishes. If multiple colors or shop or field use brake shapes are required, drawings need to indicate which part gets which finish. So every once in a while we'll have, they want the back this color, the front that color kind of thing. If multiple colors of sunshade brackets, discuss how the finishes will be identified on the fabs. Because again, we've had that where we've had, different colors of the same sunshade bracket. How do we indicate that on the thing so we get it right with Western? So again, just deep on colors. Are there any parts of the corner that get painted black? This is usually identified on the drawings, but make sure we know, because every once in a while, we usually paint that corner piece black, but every once in a while the customer wants it in the actual color. So just make sure everybody's clear about what we're doing at those little parts. And then send purchasing an extrusion colored chip sample of your painted finishes. And that typically is for the painted fasteners. So we can get your fasteners painted the right color. And Tim, we love those painted fasteners, right? Tim says yes.
Oh yeah, they're the best. Never fall off.
Love it. All right. Any question on finishes? Good. All right. Let's roll into metal. We're gonna run the final extruder results report for Heather. Figure out how many pounds of aluminum are in the estimate. So she has a gauge and the takeoff group has a gauge that they've got about the right amount of metal. So we don't have some major boof on our hands. Are the die drawings on the portal? If you've not received the final die prints yet, we should process the approved die prints for the takeoff group. So we're going to talk about that in the meeting to make sure we have them. What parts are to be outsourced for fabrication? So Heather's looking to find out like what does she need to get fabricated outside versus inside. So hook lugs, bayonets, sunshade brackets, signage brackets, panel brackets, like these are some examples of the things that we typically fabricate outside. So if you can get us a list of those things, that would be great. If you're in question, go over it with Heather. She'll walk you through it. Any post-painted parts? If so, what are the part numbers? Sunshade brackets, including jam brackets, modified angles, channels, tubes. Notify Heather. Fab ticket for these parts must be provided with a metal order. If the finish is anodized, a clamp location must be identified because they're going to clamp it and then dip it. These parts should be identified as post-painted on the metal order. So again, identifying anything that isn't being, that's being painted after we fabricate it. And then the bayonets are their standard length or custom. I mean, they're typically standard, but sometimes when you have a lot of live load, you'll get a custom length. If they're custom, provide a fab ticket to Heather. You will need to supply a count of bayonets with the metal order. For bayonets with an exposed lower bolt, the shop will modify the standard fab and the bolts are in stock, so you don't need to be ordered. So for the W75, is the hook lug the standard 1 inch or is it the 1 1/4? And are you using any of the wind load hook lugs? And then give Heather a count of those so she knows what she's getting. Are there any of the MIS 2703 serrated lock washers at the anchor lug? These needs extra coordination, will not show up on a key sheet or a unit assembly drawing. Send to the field or install as required. Any corner conditions where the corner support tube is in a vision area? So again, you get those corner tubes, but every once in a while, that's vision glass. So in those cases, we might need to paint all those parts. So we're just looking for that ahead of time so we don't mess it up. If it's unitized, are there any units that need to be bolted together? So you need to review that with the shop before proceeding. There's a Swiss for bolted units you can take a look at. But again, we're going to talk about that in the room to make sure we're all clear about what's getting bolted together and how. Extruder limitations, everybody's favorite one. So the extruders have a limit on what they can extrude. So, we're just trying to make sure you don't end up with something on your shop drawings that we can't make. So we've listed all the different finishes here and what can go through the normal paint lines. So we're just looking for you to look this over. If you have something outside these limits, we need to talk to Heather a little bit ahead of time and make sure we have it nailed down. So, do we have any parts will need to be assembled by the extruder prior to painting or shipping? So I made an example page because everybody gets confused on this one. So click on the link and I put some things together to show you what I'm talking about. So you see this shade back in here? I've got this piece here and I've got this piece here. You want to paint those at the same time so that they come out with the same finish. If you paint at different times of the day, different temperatures, different times of the week, these colors could vary slightly. And your customer won't be happy if the two parts that sit right together in one plane like this don't look right. So this is what I'm asking about. Do you have anything like this? Do you have something like this where there's a little piece here and a snap-on piece there, right? Do you have something like this where I'm putting two sunshades together to form a vertical fin or a horizontal fin? These types of things what I'm looking for, like flat surfaces that have to have the same finish, right? So that's what that question's about. I get that one a lot, but that's what this particular question's about, and I made an example page for you. By default, all brake shapes, angles, channels have their exterior surfaces as an exposed area. So again, if you think about an angle that we're ordering, we're figuring you're painting it on the outside. But maybe you're using it like on an inside corner and you're really seeing the inside of that angle. That's where you have to let Heather know, hey, this one's getting painted on the inside versus the outside. Otherwise, your finish might be not as complete on the inside of that part. So brake shapes, things like that. It's normally, I think on the brake shapes, we're showing the finished location, but it must be extrusions that this would apply to, so. Any bent or curved metal, follow the bent metal Swiss. And if this is an outside vendor, please confirm which parts are prefabricated. So if you're doing an Arcadia system, most people in this company that do what we do, like for Walton Wolf systems, don't know that your shear block comes on a little baggie with the screws, right? Like it's already made. You know, that kind of stuff isn't what most people are used to doing in our company because we make all our own shear block clips or, you know, all that kind of stuff. So we just need you to tell us what things are you buying as a completed part and what things are we ordering as a stock length.
Hey, Steve, backing up to that example you had with what the verbiage says is pre-assembled parts. I mean, Western's not going to assemble like in that shadow box type condition. They're not going to pre-assemble those, are they?
It depends. They have in the past snapped the parts together and painted them as one.
And then painted them? Oh.
Yeah, we had it on Greg's job because he had something at Stanford like that and the parts didn't come out right. And so, you know, they literally assembled them and painted them at the same time.
Okay.
But even if they don't pre-assemble them, at least they're going through the line on at the same time of day and together, right?
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Kind of vendor call on that one, but. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, stick wall stuff, when it comes up, splice sleeves, we typically anodize those so they'll slide together better. We need identify the location of the splice and the anchor type. Splices should be above the floor because if they're below the floor, it's hard to hold those things up while you get the next one in place. If you have splices in vision, we want to talk about how we would finish that off. Trying not to have exposed fasteners or, you know, how we're going to caulk the splices. We had that on a few jobs where the customer wasn't happy with how that looked. What's the floor deflection and where the horizontals accommodate this? Because again, on a stick wall with splices, we're moving up and down, and that means the horizontals moving up and down on the glass. And sometimes people forget that we only have so much glass bite. So a 2.5 inch horizontal doesn't do much more than about 3/8 of an inch of deflection. And then review all T-series transition sheets. Sometimes we get splices and things on there that don't show up, you know, anywhere else. So we just need to make sure that you've got all your small parts and pieces if there's transitions with extra pieces on it. Sheetrock trim, I cleaned this up a lot because we've kind of gone away from what we used to do. So sheetrock trim will be supplied in stock lengths to the job site and be field cut. Sheetrock trim splice locations should follow the management decision tracker. And then just in the meeting, what stock length size are we using so the takeoff team knows what to do? And your field guy will typically tell you that. On the mat clips, are they standard? And then if not, Jumpstart will need to provide a drawing as early as possible. A new mark number for the fab will need to be provided. So all this should have already happened when you get to this meeting, but just trying to make sure that you're covered. Are there any exposed mat clips to whether are visible? And again, you know, if you got a mat clip, they come with a grade 8 bolt. I can't put that bolt through any kind of heat treating because it won't be grade 8 anymore. So if you need to paint these things, you know, or they need to be finished, we have a dacrymet coating we use that doesn't have heat, but will make them weather resistant. So there's a number of things we have to do if they're exposed. So we need to know about any exposed mat clips before we get going. And then provide a mat clip count, standard clips and F clips to Heather with the embed takeoff, which should come with your shop drawing stuff. And then are there any mat clips at the edge, deck edge or a structural steel with varying elevation heights? And again, you know, so if your roof line sort of slopes up, your mat clips kind of go along at an angle, right? So if that's the case, we just want to talk, you know, have that on here so we know it exists. Typically, we will put your hook lugs just at a height above that in some spandrel area, and the guys will pop them off and move them where they have to go before they hoist the unit. But we'd like to indicate that on the shop drawing so we're clear about where that is and talk and have it in these notes so we all know it happens. Any question on any of those? Cool. All right. Embeds for unitized project, we're supplying Hilti or Halfin. I mean, it's almost always Hilti these days. And then embed drawings to Heather would be great. Are we furnishing embeds to precast? Make sure your priming requirements are on them. We had a bunch of problems with this in the past where we didn't indicate where it was supposed to be primed, and either precast wanted it primed or did not want it primed because of how they do their thing. So make sure you're talking about that before you order these embeds. And our steel
I feel
embeds
like-
required.
I feel like recently, Steve, that if we're doing the tube embeds for precast, that they were providing the fabs. Is that true?
That'd be great. It wasn't in the past. That's what I'm asking.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they're providing fabs and they're providing the embeds and just billing us for them.
Okay.
At least they
That-
are on
that-
Stanford Bridge.
Yeah, that'd be great. I don't know what happens on with Willis or Clark. But again, just if you have embeds that you're selling to some precast guy, make sure you've sat with them and say, hey, where do you want the primer? Because they can't finish to it with their materials if the primer's in the wrong spot. And that's what we got burned on. Are steel embeds required? Does caulking come into contact with the steel embeds? We have this on a job, the steel embed isn't really caulking compatible, so you need some kind of flashing there. And then drafting should supply the embed fabrication drawings with your embed layouts. Please review primary requirements prior to ordering, and all temp holes are now 1/4 inch, not 3/16. I can probably remove that because that's been a while. All right, we're down to glass. Yay! How many lights of glass are there? So just give me a count. Are the PGTs complete with all approved glass types? And again, the count is because we just need a quick back check when we do your glass takeoff to make sure we have the right number of lights, right? Just, you don't want your takeoff team handing you a glass takeoff and then you're like, hey, you got the wrong number of lights, and then we're back and forth 15 times, right? Make sure your PGTs are complete with all the approved glass types. Do we have any special GC requirements for glass on this project? I'm sorry, QC requirements. So, there's the Starlight, or what it's called, a standard where you have to supply paperwork every single time that they produce glass from the factory. So make sure you have that all listed out. Have the corner zones and windows been determined for your project? That should have already happened, but if not, we need to determine the sight lines. And then are all the different glass types with different sight lines indicated on the shop drawings? And that should have also already happened. But if not, make sure it does before you get to the glass takeoff. Any questions on that? Because I think that's been a lot smoother lately, so.
Steve, real quick,
And
for the PGTs,
Yes.
is it imperative that we have the picture sample of the sample that we gave to the customer?
It should be the approved sample yet. At this point, we're going to order glass, right, in 2 weeks.
Mhm.
So we should have that approved sample on that page by this point.
Okay.
Do we have any glass that's thicker than an inch? So this comes up a lot, and hopefully you're doing this really, really early. Get a glass sample and measure it. Because whatever they tell you it's going to be, it won't be. So if they tell you it's 1 3/8, it's never 1 3/8. It's whatever all those thicknesses build up to actually be. So if you've got glass that isn't 1 inch, make sure you physically measure the samples to get an idea of what the glass thickness will really be. And that should be happening early on because it affects a lot of things on your job, gasket sizes, setting blocks, all sorts of things. Who's the glass vendor? If this is a unitized and you're using glass fab, be sure to discuss distribution, and especially in Northern California, because we have them ship it by pallet, not by week. So there's a couple extra steps. So get with Bree if it's glass fab and you're doing unitized walls. Is the tempered glass indicated on the elevation? So we put a big note here because we have messed this up more times than you know. You need to ensure that tempered laminate glass is indicated in all safety locations. You're also responsible to ensure that you are not tempering glass where it's not required due to nickel sulfide inclusions. So no tempered glass, outer glass above 25 feet of a walking surface, or, for instance. If you're unsure, please review with your drafting manager, James Rico. So make sure you've had this review. It should have happened early on when we go from the model to the shop drawings. We typically do this review. But make sure you go through this with somebody because I've spent a lot of your money fixing this problem. Let's put it that way. Do we have any structurally glazed vertical or horizontal conditions? We need to know about that. Do we have any spandrel glass that is not ceramic frit? That's usually that silicone stuff on the back, and those take cutbacks if you're doing structural. Doesn't happen a lot, but it comes up. Do the insulated units need any special consideration due to the structural conditions? So maybe you've got like an offset outside corner, or maybe, you know, that type of thing. So we're just looking for anything odd with the glass that Bree needs to know about before we place the order. And then on the inside of the glass, what color is the spacer? We should have already pushed the customer toward our bronze or black spacer. Black's our standard. And hopefully we're not getting mill or something else. It looked a lot better on the job site. On insulated glass, is your silicone any color besides black, which I think is only gray, right? But we just need to know if you're shooting your insulated unit with some weird silicone color, this is where you want to tell us. And then do you have any offset glass at the corners? And then we need to show how we're going to indicate this to the vendor. We had a job where the Excel print range was wrong and the glass came out wrong because we didn't print the sheet properly. So just check your Excel print range and make sure everything's printing properly. Any glass that's greater width than 96. Again, you have to look at this because the roller wave, you want it to be perpendicular to the width. So you want to be careful about this one. Roller wave distortion, you don't want to have your glass going through the oven in two different directions, because on the job site, it's going to look weird on the actual building. So we're just looking for large lights and making sure they're going through the oven all the same direction. So typically this would be really wide lights run into this problem. Anything greater than 40 square feet, and we talk about capillary tubes if they're required, and how they're identified, and if we have to seal them. And then any splices in the spacer if you have a large light. Because we typically want to make sure the splice isn't some weird mill finish color and not right at somebody's eye level when they're walking down the building. So just something to think about on larger lights.
Hey, Steve.
And then,
yeah, on capillary tubes, I haven't seen a job require those in quite a long time. Are we still seeing that? And what instances are we seeing that happen in right now?
It was happening when they were shipping them certain ways if they had to go over the mountains to get here.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Virocon's gone the other way, right? They ship in a different direction or something, because I haven't seen it on a Virocon job in a while.
I haven't either, and that's kind of why I was asking. I was just also curious about if it's coming from overseas, because it's hard to predict where they're going to ship once they get here, right? Or if how they transport it over there. What if they went over a mountain range over there before they went to port or something?
Yeah, I think most of the overseas vendors are they're arriving at a port that doesn't require any sort of transportation like that.
Mm-hmm.
They're either coming in on the south or they're coming in on our side. But yeah, I haven't seen a lot of capillary tubes either. But again, just something to be thinking about, because it comes up and when it does, then we have a problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think and Bree might, if she's on here, might correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Krista Curva might use those capillary tubes. Just FYI.
Yeah, they did quote it for the curved glass, the curved units.
Oh, okay. Maybe it's just curved. I just remember that coming up.
We'll have to look at that again.
Right. Silk screen and frit patterns. So, how are we doing the patterns, right? So like some frit patterns are easy. They're just a bunch of dots and nobody cares where they are. But if you want your dots to line up with other dots, or you want your lines to line up with other lines, we all have to talk, because we have to lay those out carefully in the Revit model to get the glass taken off properly for you. So there's a lot of little instances with the any kind of silk screens or frit patterns where we do need to have a good conversation before we do the glass takeoff.
Hey, Steve, you might want to add in here. I just on 100 Altera, we just had this condition where we submitted samples of the bird frit glass with the dots. There was no alignment issue or anything, but the architect never gave any indication of what pattern he wanted to see. Mm-hmm. And Garibaldi, followed what the sample did on 90%, but there were some lights that were, instead they usually start in the center of the light with the space, and then equally space their dots after that. A couple lights, they started in the center with a dot and then made their pattern. So it was clearly different than all the others, but we never gave them any direction. They never asked us that question, and the architect never gave any feedback. So that may be something else to ask, even though it's a standard pattern. of dots, you may want to still ask, how do they start them?
Well, and then to get them all aligned too, right? Because like what happened on PIP, we had Viracon was like, well, in order for us to do this, it requires us to do way more setups than
Oh, for sure.
initially
Yeah.
figured in the job. I mean, it didn't come out to be like a huge number, but definitely
yeah.
was an add.
Yep.
Okay, I'll add a note for that. Yeah, agreed though, and that comes up down here too. How many setups were estimated? How many setups will be required if we order by week? So sometimes that happens too, where there's, they're like, hey, I've got one silk screen, but you're making me run it, 15 weeks in a row. So sometimes we may have to change the way we're going to get the glass delivered, just to save on setups on silk screens too. And then, if we're going to go through the silk screen stuff, we got to make sure how's the guy on the shop floor know how the pattern's going to be applied, right? How are we going to indicate to him? Because he's standing out there with a piece of glass that could go this way or this way. Like, how do we tell him, right? Any pattern glass with non-90-degree corners, these lights carry premium charges. Discuss putting these lights on a separate tab. And I think that's typically what we do. Are the glass types and descriptions finalized? We will not take the information from. So I want to talk about this real quick. So are the glass types and descriptions finalized? We will not take the information from the general note sheets or from the PGTs. Approved glass types have to come from the PM. So, and I've got a little yes or no list here. Okay, are the glass types, are they finalized? If yes, PM to give the glass types and descriptions in writing to the takeoff team for input into the glass order form. If not, will the glass types and descriptions be finalized before the release date of the glass? If so, then you give that description to the takeoff team. Otherwise, the PM is going to put the glass types and descriptions on the forms once we send them to you. So I will not have the takeoff team responsible for copying stuff off your shop drawings that may or may not be right. I'm not going to have them pulling them from some PGT, which may or not be right. What I want is you to tell me exactly what you want on the order form, or you can do it yourself. So just, are we clear on that one? Because we can completely get burned on this. When I talked to people in the takeoff team, they thought this stuff in the front of the shop drawings was okay. And I'm like, no, like there's a lot of times when that does not get updated like it should be. Do you have applied grid buttons or internal grids? If so, make sure to review the details for tolerance and alignment. Use a mechanical fastener if possible to anchor grids to curtain wall system. We used to have a lot of these. It's kind of fallen off. Do you have any field use glass or any leave out scaffolding tiebacks, access to mini-max, etc.? If so, discuss how you want the glass order form as a, because you may want a different thing so it goes to the field versus into the shop, right? All right, we're at 1:58 and we still got quite a ways to go. So I'm going to leave off at glass today, and then we'll have to set up a second session to go through the rest of the notes. Any questions on any of that today? It's a lot.
That's very helpful.
Yeah,
Thank you
that's
for
great.
going through
Yeah.
these things line by line.
Yeah, so we'll roll through the rest. Tom can help me get it scheduled, and we'll do one more session. I think we can get through the rest of it. So
Nice.